I didn't hear back from Alina on Sunday after she went to the lab Martin supposedly works at. I tried all day and I never got through to her. I was panicked and called all of our friends, thinking that Alina was playing some sort of sick joke on me. I called her office this morning, only to learn that she never showed up for work. Then around noon, I got a text from Jen. Alina is in a coma. I was at the hospital all day yesterday, in spite of the fact that I'm still sick myself. But then, really, that makes it the best place to be, I guess. Besides, hospitals are well lit. I've noticed her forearm is bandaged up. The doctors aren't sure what's wrong, but she seems to have a small mass in her brain, and they think it's causing this. I haven't slept in so long, I'm feeling a bit loopy, but I wanted to post this. Sorry for the slight delay. I left my laptop at work when Jen called about Alina. I'm not going to make any more promises about when I'll update, except to say it will be as soon as possible. Hopefully in 24 hours, but then again, I don't feel like I can guarantee that I'll still be here by the time that comes around. I'm sorry if this section is not up to snuff. Things are kind of hard to remember and my brain isn't working properly anymore. I just want to sleep. I told the police about the university and gave them the location of where Alina went to investigate Martin's lab. I'm hoping they find something. Regardless, I'm considering going there myself after work today. I woke up the next morning to my alarm and the sun shining through my bedroom window. I always wake up to the same tone. Taylor Swift's Shake It Off. Yeah, judge me if you want. Yet that wasn't the melody blaring through the speaker today. I Believe in a Thing Called Love by The Darkness invaded my ears instead. Cool song, haven't heard that in a while. Jan murmured as he stirred from where he'd spent the night in the recliner by my bed. It's not mine, I answered vaguely, perturbed. Jan gave me more gauze to wrap around my thigh. The 3 red gashes were still slicing angrily across my flesh, proving I hadn't just fabricated the event in one of my nightmares. Jan tried to get me to talk about what had occurred, but I just couldn't. I was convinced he'd think I was crazy, if he didn't already. I didn't hear from Martin all that day, and was grateful for that. We'd made plans to go to a comedy club that coming Tuesday, but I was considering canceling. It seemed the more time I spent away from him, the less contact I had, the clearer my head became, and the more dots I connected that all seemed to point to him. Yet I still felt this nearly overwhelming need to message or call him. I spent most of the day getting ahead on some research I'd fallen behind on. I had just allowed myself to believe that I'd survived nearly 24 hours with everything running normally. And then I logged into Facebook late that night. 333 friend requests, all from the same person. My heart dropped as I examined the small photo icon beside each request. This was a face I knew, a handsome, grinning young man whose image had been seared into my memory forever. Because it was from the only photo of my father my mother ever possessed. I immediately picked up the phone and dialed my mom back in the US. I barely let her say hello before I blurted out a question I was pretty sure I already knew the answer to. Mom, what's my father's name? I asked. Why do you want to know, Peanut? Please, Mom, this is important. What was his name? There must have been a touch of desperation on my voice because I could now hear the worry in hers. She told me his name. A name I'd never asked for in 25 years out of stubbornness and spite. It matched the friend requests. Mom asked me what was going on and I debated whether or not to tell her. With the death of my grandparents and my move abroad, her mental state had been fragile recently. Still, I couldn't outright lie to her, so I told a half-truth. Simply that I'd gotten a friend request from a man that looked like my father and had the same name. Well, it's your decision, honey, whether to accept it, Tara. I can't tell you what to do. Maybe he's finally trying to get in touch, she told me gently. I ended the call, telling her I loved her and would contact her soon. I couldn't decide what to do, so I tabled the decision for the moment and closed my laptop down. At this point, I had resolved to tell Beth at the very least. I sent her a message and hoped she'd reply by the time I woke up that morning. However, I never heard from her. Instead, I set up another Skype session with Nina for that evening, hoping that she would know what was going on with Max, despite the rough patch she and Rhett were going through. Look, Max made Rhett and all of us promise not to tell you about it. But it's wrong at this point not to. Max has been in the hospital. He's really, really sick, Tara, Nina confessed. But that's not all of it. He's been acting weird. Rhett thinks it's just the medicine he's on, but I'm not so sure. I think the accident has messed with his head somehow. What do you mean by weird? I asked. He's been screaming, throwing fits. 1 minute he's fine, and the next he's looking in the corner or at the door like he's about to piss himself. And he's been yelling for you, Tara. Mumbling your name in his sleep, and sometimes when he's awake too. But when he's lucid, he doesn't want us to contact you. He must be hurting himself too. The doctors keep finding cuts on him. I'm worried. He's not stable. Rhett and Beth and Dylan all thought it was best not to tell you. Sydney and I decided you needed to know, though, she concluded. Look, I hate to ask this, but can you call him from the hospital and let me talk to him? I pleaded. Nina happened to be a dietitian at the hospital Max was now staying at. She agreed that on her next shift tomorrow morning, she would call me and let me speak to Max. For now, though, I had to wait. We signed off Skype after talking some more about her and Rhett's relationship problems and me offering whatever advice I could. A few minutes later, I received a call, and I didn't even look at the ID before answering it. Hey, hadn't heard from you in a while. I was a little worried and wanted to check in. Martin's voice invaded my ears. It was the first time he'd actually called me. Yeah, things have, been busy. I sounded unsure even to my own ears. Are you sure you're okay? You sound worried or something. Do you need me to come over? He asked. A part of me suddenly wanted to say yes, please come over. The thought of Max lying in the hospital, sick and slowly going crazy, flashed through my head. No, I backpedaled. I really am okay. Just busy. I promise. I lied. If you say so, but I'm here if you need anything. Are we still on for tomorrow? He asked. I should have said no. And yet, I didn't. The words were on the tip of my lips, but they came out wrong. And I was agreeing to meet Martin at the comedy club at 7 the next evening like we planned. In my dreams that night, I was back in the forest, walking along the stone pathway once more. It appeared to be midday, with sunlight streaming in through the trees and bathing the woods in a golden glow. As I kept walking, the trees seemed to grow taller, thicker, blocking out more and more of the sun. I approached the clearing and looked upwards. There was a huge dark mass writhing above the stone circle where the man in the green and white pinstripe suit stood. Casting his face in shadows, his black tendrils oozed down and pulsed around him. At his feet were 3 things: 3 stone bowls, my grandmother's necklace, and a small fire pit. Once again he reached out to me, beckoning me closer. I was again aware of the presence of many beings in the forest. I could feel their eyes on me. Even if the shadows were hiding their forms, they wanted me to accept, to step into the circle. I looked down at my body. The light was pulling around me, bending and blurring out my form in the surroundings and obscuring any fine details. I couldn't distinguish the line where I ended and the surrounding air began. I hesitated as the glitch continued. I heard the noises, then a symphony of angry, prodding whispers that grew and grew until I was on my knees. From the pain of the loud cacophony, I looked at the man and the darkness around him. Just like before, it shot out at me, wrapping me in its inky mass. I couldn't breathe. As it constricted tighter and tighter still, my vision began to darken. I woke with a start, gasping for breath. 3 a.m. I didn't go back to sleep that night. I logged into Facebook. All the friend requests were gone, and I couldn't find my father with the search feature anymore. Monday passed by in a blur. As I anxiously waited for my phone to ring. At 4 p.m, it finally did. It was Nina, telling me she was about to hand the phone over to Max. Hello? Max's voice sounded groggy. Max, it's Tara. I heard about everything. Please, what's going on? Why have you been ignoring my calls? Tara! Max screamed into the phone. I heard him start screaming my name over and over while Nina tried to calm him. After about 2 minutes, I heard it again. The same word the old woman had yelled. Max was saying it now instead of my name. Shit, Tara. This wasn't a good idea. Nina came back on the phone, her voice rushed. Look, I have to go, okay? I need to get to the doctor. I promise I'll be in touch. She hung up before I could respond. Against my better judgment, I decided to meet up with Martin for our date at the comedy club. I couldn't convince myself it was a bad idea despite my efforts. I felt pulled toward him for some reason. I still do. When we got inside, I refused to drink any alcohol and ended up ordering a plain club soda instead. At first, I was tense. However, as time went on, I relaxed more and more as Martin gently pressed kisses to my forehead and held my hand. The room quieted as a tall, thin man with a goatee and a white cane made his way onto the stage and began to speak. The audience gave a light chuckle. I thought you said this will be in English, I asked Martin, not recognizing the language they were speaking on stage. I thought it was. I think they've changed the comedian. Would you like to leave? He offered for some reason. I decided to stay. As the performance went on, I felt myself getting slightly dizzy. I looked around at the audience. Their mouths were open in mock grins, with laughter bubbling forward as though paying attention to the man on stage, but their eyes and heads were all turned toward where Martin and I sat at the front. I looked at one table containing 5 middle-aged men and women and focused on them. Their mouths were still open, laughing, but their eyes were pools of black, looking right back at me. They were sitting ramrod straight, bodies facing frontward, but heads turned at unnatural angles to complete their stare. The more I focused, the more light began to smear around their edges and their features blurred into the surroundings, becoming almost indistinguishable. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the glitch was over. "Are you ready to go?" I heard Martin ask. "What?" I looked around and everyone was gone from the club, and Martin and I were the last ones left. The stage was dark. Spotlight turned off God knows how long. Where had the people went? "Well, I think if we sit here anymore, they're going to kick us out." Martin laughed, pulling me up from my chair and wrapping his arms around me. Martin walked me to the nearest train station and gave me a light kiss goodbye, promising to be in touch soon. I got off at the stop closest to my apartment and began walking up the large hill to my building. I heard a rustle behind me. As I looked around, I couldn't see anything in the darkness of the residential street, and then I heard a long, low growl and whipped around. Behind me stood a large black dog, snarling at me as it exposed its sharp canines, larger than any dog I'd ever seen. It had to have easily reached my waist, though it was so black that it was almost completely camouflaged by the surrounding darkness. I looked at the white foam surrounding its mouth. Whatever small amount of light there was in the moonless night caught its eyes, and they reflected with a horrible yellow glow. I began to back away slowly, my eyes on the dog. I thought that maybe I was going to make it out of this unscathed, as the dog continued to just glare and snarl. As soon as I had the thought, the dog moved faster than I could have imagined. It was on me in a flash, teeth sinking into my arm as I screamed and tried to hit at it with my free hand. Its yellow eyes looked straight at me as I fought to get away, and for a moment, I thought there was true intelligence behind those orbs. It held on for a few seconds before releasing me, as suddenly as it had attacked. If I hadn't known better, I would swear it disappeared, melting back into the darkness it came from. Its teeth had left 3 long, parallel scratches along my forearm. I yanked my cardigan off and wrapped it around the wound to stave off the flow of blood and ran back home. Jan and Bernard were still out, probably at the bars. I was alone. I threw on every light in the apartment and locked myself in my room, eventually going to sleep after wrapping my arm in some gauze I still had from my thigh. That night, the 5th nightmare came. This time, I was in an old factory. Giant iron containers of molten metal cast everything in an eerie orange light. Some sat off to the side, while others traveled along a platform above, being carried along by a vast network of machines. To the side was a conveyor belt with that same lava-like ooze flowing down it. Walking along the conveyor line, I eventually reached a room where 3 people stood: Lexi, Jen, and Alina. Above their heads, 3 glowing vats loomed. As I approached them, I raised my left hand. There it was again, the bone-handled knife. For the second time, I noticed black numbers painted hastily on the handle, but couldn't quite make them out. I walked up to Lexi, who was standing on the farthest right, and slashed those 3 parallel lines down her forearm where the blood pooled into a stone bowl below. Next was Alina, then Jen. Walking over to the side, I saw a panel of buttons with one large red one lit up at the center. I pressed it, and the molten material above my friend's head rained down on them, melting their forms away, until all that was left was the soft, warm glow. The glow only illuminated the black mass I now noticed looming behind where my friends had been standing. I knew what it wanted me to do. I raised the blade upwards toward my neck and slashed it across my own throat. Once again, I woke with a start. 3:13 a.m. Out of habit, I checked my phone, and of course, there was a message sent by Martin at 3:05 a.m. I was thinking, maybe we should go camping next weekend. We could build a fire and roast some marshmallows, winky face. It read. This time, I responded, I'm busy. Sorry. On Tuesday morning, I nearly squashed a small package outside my doorstep in my haste to get out since I was late for work. There was no address anywhere in the package. I grabbed it up and hurried to the tram, opening it when I got inside. It was a dream catcher.